Hey guys, today I want to talk with you about The Inmate, a psychological crime thriller slash mystery thriller by Freida McFadden that was published in 2022. As per usual, we will start this video with a short synopsis, then proceed to the non-spoiler review and wrap this video up with the spoilers. If you haven't read this book yet, then do not worry. I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. So, in The Inmate, we follow the story of Brooke during two different points in her life. Simultaneously, in one timeline, we get to see a grown-up Brooke who is moving back to her hometown and starting a new job as a nurse practitioner at a men's maximum security prison, where her high school sweetheart is being held. While in the other timeline, we get to go back to Brooke's past and follow the events of the night that changed Brooke's life forever, as well as landed her boyfriend in prison. But what if the events of that night are not as straightforward as Brooke seemed to think? And what if her failure in judgment resulted in an innocent man spending 10 years of his life behind the bars? So, if you have followed my channel for a little while now, you might have heard me mentioning once or twice that I work in a bookstore. And that's exactly how I first got introduced to Freida McFadden. This author that I have never heard of before published a book called The Housemaid. And suddenly everyone and their mother wanted to get their hands on it. And I'm not exaggerating here. The Housemaid was flying off the shelves at the speed that obviously caught my attention. Yet, despite being a self-proclaimed fan of crime novels, who read nothing but crime exclusively for most of my 20s, I read the synopsis of the book and thought, sounds great, but not what I need at the moment. These years, I'm sticking to fantasy and romance. And being true to that, I started the year by reading Gold Rush Ranch series by Elsie Silver, then listening to Culty by Mariana Zapata, He's Not My Type by Megan Quinn, The Billionaire's Wake-Up Call Girl by Annika Martin, and Mile High by Liston Fordy, while working on the house. Now that's a total of 7 romance novels I have consumed in a span of 3 weeks, give or take. And that's a lot of romance. Enough for me to start to feel the burnout and get annoyed by the formulaic nature of the genre. And that's when my audiobook app pushed forward Freida McFadden's Inmate. I clicked on it, and a few hours later, I knew that I would be reading every single book that has been written by this woman. The Inmate hooked me in badly. It's a very easy to read, a very easy to follow, simple crime novel that is also a wonderfully written family drama. There are very few characters in this novel that truly matter, but they all play a very important part in the story. Their existence in this book is well thought through and justified. The protagonist feels like a realistic human being, flawed for sure, stupid at times, yet very relatable. Even if she is not someone you can imagine yourself being, you surely have someone in your environment whom you could imagine behaving the way Brooke does. Because even when she does something ridiculously dumb, you understand why she does it. You might not agree with her, but there is a reason behind her actions. She's not perfect, but she is human, and more often than not, her decisions are influenced by her feelings, her previous experiences, and her traumatic past. In addition to that, The Inmate is full of twists and turns. The author does an impeccable job of messing with your psyche, making you feel paranoid. She forces you to question everyone's motives and threads a fine line between the truth and the lies. Everyone is a suspect. Everyone is a bad guy, and everyone is a victim at the exact same time. You never know which side the scale will fall to. I absolutely love this book. It kept me intrigued, it kept me guessing, and it provided me with all the answers when the time was right. No plotline was left behind. No side story was left unfinished. That being said, of course I cannot claim that The Inmate is an absolute perfection. It is not a literary masterpiece. On the contrary, often it feels a bit too convenient, a tad unrealistic, but it does not pretend to have some hidden depth. And while it does touch upon the philosophical discussion on nature versus nurture, it doesn't actually dwell on it. It doesn't preach, and it lets the reader to come to their own conclusions. It's a work of fiction that doesn't try to emulate real life. Instead, its main purpose is to entertain, and I was definitely entertained. As soon as I was done with The Inmate, I jumped to read The Housemaid, a fascinating thriller, by the way. Then made my way to Never Lie, The Teacher, and I already had The Coworker and the sequels to The Housemaid on the shelves waiting for their turn. Freida McFadden, with this book alone, secured herself a spot within my top 5 favorite psychological mystery thriller writers, and I absolutely cannot recommend this book enough. That being said, The Inmate is a book that leaves the biggest impact when you know as little about it as possible. And honestly, it is getting quite difficult to continue to talk about it without stepping into any plot details. Therefore, I think that this is a great time for us to move to the spoiler review, where we could discuss the main characters and the ending of the novel. So let's start the spoiler review by looking at our main trio: Brooke, Shane, and Tim. And if it's been a while since you've read this book and need a little reminder, Shane is Brooke's ex-boyfriend who is serving a lifetime sentence for several gruesome murders, and Tim is Brooke's childhood best friend and current love interest. And both of them, in my humble opinion, are shady as hell. Now, when we first meet Tim in our current timeline, it is very easy for us to fail for his simple, boyish charm. Even before we learn about his and Brooke's childhood friendship, it is easy enough for us to see that Tim harbors a lot of feelings when it comes to Brooke, and without a doubt sees this as his chance to turn his wishes into a reality. Something I was instantly on board with, as before starting The Inmate, I binged 7 romance novels in a row, and my brain was still functioning in a different setting, ignoring the obvious danger. Overall, when it comes to Tim, I feel like the author did a wonderful job giving us just enough details about him to make us constantly doubt his intentions. Even the fact that during the flashbacks, we are told that Brooke and Tim are the very best friends, but not actually shown, makes the friendship, less authentic, leaving more space for doubts. One thing for sure, and back then and now, Tim is borderline obsessed with the idea of Brooke. The question we were left with is if Tim's obsession is bad enough to push him to kill. Back in high school, he was mostly jealous of Shane and to some extent worried about Brooke's well-being, for a good reason, as we know now. And nowadays, while he keeps his emotions under control better, it is still quite obvious that Tim believes that he knows best. And in all fairness, he does. Brooke should have changed the job when she had a chance. She should not have brought Shane back into their lives, and she should have warned her son herself about the danger that might be lurking. But as people say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And the way Tim goes about all of this often comes off as possessive rather than caring, making it so much easier for us, the readers, to believe that Tim is not the good guy he pretends to be, making us doubt about his involvement during the night of the murders. Even after all becomes clear, I can't truly decide how I feel about Tim. On one hand, I do not think that he's an unfeeling sociopath, capable of murder and set on ruining Brooke's life, the same way Shane is, but the fact that Tim took Brooke back after everything that happened between them felt a little sus. Once again, not I will kill you in your sleep kind of sus, but not truly healthy either. As far as we know, Tim has been in love with Brooke for half of his life. He loved her when she only wanted to be his friend. He loved her when she was dating a guy Tim disapproved of. He loved her where she openly doubted his involvement into the murders, and he kept on loving her after she came back with a son of his enemy, pointed a finger at him, believing him to be a serial killer, and got her ex out of prison. Now, when it comes to Shane, I feel like Freida McFadden wrote his scenes in prison with one clear goal, and that goal being to make him look like a good guy. We have all these people around him constantly reminding us of his true nature, but every time he himself comes into the picture, he is nothing but kind, polite, and understanding. Sure, it's obvious to us that he is not a saint either, but this divide between Shane and the rest of the world is so obvious that I can't even pinpoint at which point in the book I started to believe Shane's innocence. And even by the time that dead woman was found in Tim's house, and from Tim's reaction I could clearly see that he was not involved in her murder, I still wasn't sure that Shane killed anyone either. Ever. Which pushed me into a weird position where I suddenly had a crime and no suspects. To put it simply, Freida McFadden played with my emotions so easily and so masterfully that I couldn't help myself but come back for more. All of that being said, before we jump into the ending of the book, I need to point out that probably the weakest part of the book is that in order to confuse the reader, build tension, or deliver more dramatic storylines, the author of the novel tends to blur the lines of logic. Like Tim forgetting that Brooke was almost suffocated with a necklace and buying her one for her birthday. Even if he didn't believe it to be the same actual necklace, it's still a poor choice of a gift if you ask me. Or like no one in the small town knowing how Shane's mother looks and being curious about the reasons behind her suddenly being so close to Brooke and her family, despite believing that it was Shane who killed those kids and tried to kill Brooke too. Or how Shane's mom managed to kill multiple women, staying completely undetected in this day and age. Or last but not least, just how easy it was for Shane to get out of prison once Brooke changed her testimony. Not that I'm complaining, the inmate was never advertised as a true crime story, and therefore the logic doesn't always have to mirror the real world. But if you are a real crime buff, I can see how these instances could have been annoying to you. All in all, I felt like the novel did an amazing job blurring the lines between what's right and wrong. The epilogue basically tells us that this sociopathic behavior is inherited and can't be avoided no matter how loving or caring your family might be. Shane's mom was violent and emotionless, so her son was born with the same violent tendencies, and so did his son after that. And while the whole nature versus nurture debate is incredibly compelling, and neither of the sides can be actually proven in the real world, it didn't make for a shocking finale, which also kind of made me wonder as a reader, where do I stand? Brooke's father cheated on his wife and left his mistress once all of this got too complicated, essentially forcing Shane to believe that it is his duty to avenge his mother. Yet, he is a monster. We see him and his mother for who they are, and we condemn them for it. So does that mean that we should see Brooke's little boy the same way too? He killed his father, which is great news for us, the readers, because we knew the severity of the situation, but the boy didn't. He was told once by Tim that Shane is dangerous. Once. And yet he felt so secure in his trust in Tim that he killed Shane without a second thought. So just because he is young, just because he wouldn't hurt Tim or his own mom, just because we didn't like Shane and knew how dangerous he is, do we let it all slide? Or do we believe that now we have a new monster in the making? Either way, all of this is only my opinion. What about yours?